Hello. Welcome to the show. Appreciate it. I'm going to have to change the thumbnail to the show. My special guest that I had for today had to cancel. He ended up coming down with something bad. But we wish him a speedy recovery. And so we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to review some videos. I think that some people were planning on tuning in. But if you do tune in, make sure you like the video. All that kind of good stuff, right? So we're going to jump right into it. We're not going to belabor the time. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, share, and all that kind of good stuff. Here in Connecticut, there was a story that went down a couple of day or so ago about someone showing up at people's houses, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here. So we're going to put this on the screen, and this is I did a video. Just the other day when I was speaking with William Lopez about what happens when with ICE agents wearing masks, etc. And no one likes that. I certainly don't like it. But why do they wear masks and all that? So as being a member of law enforcement, I believe that we ought to be held accountable. And and one way to hold officers accountable is to be able to show their face, ask for badge numbers, names, etc. And so that way we will have an idea about how to hold these individuals accountable, file complaints, etc. That's not happening in the case of ICE agents, and sometimes with good understanding as to why. And I don't want anyone, police officers, DOC workers, ICE agents, FBI agents, I don't want anyone being doxxed. I think that we ought to overhaul the whole, freedom of information idea. I don't think that anybody's address should be available to the general public. I don't think that at all. Why can somebody look in Ohio be able to look up someone who lives in Connecticut or in Kentucky and then go to their house and then attack them? And that is, or just know where they live. I think you want to stop stalking and other heinous crimes like that. This is one way to do it. All right. So let's get into this particular story. So here's the story of what I understand. I didn't dig into the story. We're going to watch the news right here. And this is a story about a guy who shows up at a trooper's house, and the trooper, defends himself somehow, some way. Again, I didn't read the story yet. I just saw the clip, but we're going to review what the news says about it. And be very careful when you're watching the news, because it's a 2-minute clip or so, and they got to run on to the next thing. So they do not do a deep dive. And there have been many cases and times when I've been on calls, seen the news from those particular calls, and think to myself, that didn't happen at all, or it's drastically underplayed or downplayed or something like that. All right. So again, this is a guy who shows up at a trooper's house. Let's dig into it.
And his cameraman arrested at a state trooper's home Friday. Now they're fighting.
I think she said a YouTuber.
YouTuber and his cameraman arrested at a state trooper's home Friday. Now they're fighting back on those charges. Luke Hydash.
Now look at this blurring they got right here. Right, you're blurring it for everyone to see, so everyone can't see. Right, watching in YouTube land or whatever. Why? I would assume. Well, actually, I don't know. Let me retract that, because there's the numbers on the house right here. We certainly don't know the street. Maybe the street's right here. But I'm curious as to what they're blurring right there.
is your reporter covering Militant County. He is live in Groton right now to explain. Luke.
These men are First Amendment auditors. They record their interactions with police and government employees and post them online. They identify themselves as independent journalists. And on Friday, they went to Sergeant Brian Fahey's home with questions about his overtime, and they left under arrest.
See, this is what I'm saying, right? This is problematic, right? They post people's overtimes. People send it to me. They post people's overtime. They post people. Sometimes you gotta, as police officers, we had to fill out special paperwork so Freedom of Information wouldn't find out where the city employees lived. Why is that? Why is that even? Listen, that whole thing needs to be retracted. I understand that their tax, that their salary is paid by taxpayers. I get all that. I get that. But there's no reason, no way that anyone ought to just be able to look up people's where they live. I just disagree with that wholeheartedly. Somebody's in the comments section here. Agreed. What's up, Garrett? Agreed. Too much info out there is terrible. Selling info should be criminal and enforced. Yeah, no one should be able to do that. No one should be able to do that. That's crazy.
Get that property. Get that gun out of your hand. Get off my property. Get that gun out of your Connecticut State Trooper. I don't care who you are.
In the initial moment, I just didn't want to be shot.
First Amendment auditor Sean Reyes runs Long Island Audit. Friday's confrontation is the latest between him and State Police Sergeant Brian Fahey.
I should get to work. Is that what you're telling me?
If you're busy.
We're going to have a problem.
That was 2021. Friday.
You are. Right now. You spit in my face. My property right You're going to jail now.
But Reyes and his photographer wind up being booked, charged with breach of peace, voyeurism with malice, and criminal trespass.
These are baseless charges, and the real criminal should be arrested and charged.
Groton police aren't commenting, neither are state police, but confirm Fahey is not suspended or on leave.
He was the aggressor. The video is very clear on what happened.
I'm back to blue until there's bad cops out there.
Jeff runs a similar audit group, Connecticut Transparency, protesting outside Groton Police Monday.
Disgusting. Just alone the spitting in the face and then brandishing the gun the whole time.
Reyes had questions about Fahey's overtime, which made up about 38% of his 2023 pay and 36% of last year's pay.
You have a weapon in your hand?
Always remain peaceful. There is a way for accountability to be had. We need to handle this in the court of law. We need to be peaceful. We can't stoop down to criminal behavior.
Reyes tells us that Fahey has a protective order against him now. Reyes and his photographer will be back in court here in Connecticut later this month. Your reporter live.
I'm totally on the cop side. I'm totally on the cop side in that particular instance. Listen, that's just absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. So, yeah, absolutely nuts. Crazy. What do I think of neighborhood watches? I think I'm all for them. I'm not exactly sure what you mean. You mean neighbors banding together to look at the community and protect the community? I'm all for that, right? I'm part of a group right now that, we all have our some kind of neighborhood watch thing, and we upload videos. I've uploaded a video. Some guy was on my porch one day. So yeah. So I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So in this particular case, I think that this cop was absolutely dead wrong. Yeah. I'm trying to think whether I want to cover another story or I want to talk about the Second Amendment. Maybe I'll take this time to talk about the Second Amendment. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. My philosophy, and it's really going to be short and brief. My philosophy about these. Do I want to do it now? Or do I want to create a separate video about it? No, we'll do it now. Remove. All right. Yeah. Second Amendment. Let's go. Okay. Why does this do this? I don't know what's up with this. Why is this doing this? Why is this doing this? There it is. That one. All right. Second Amendment. I ran through some books. I did want to read something else from the Well, the Second Amendment guys, what are those guys' names? The lobby, NRA. I wanted to read what they said about the Second Amendment. I had a guy, Second Amendment. So I had a guy, his name was Black Man with a Gun. And he was on my podcast 2 times before. Hey Yoli. He was on my podcast before, and we didn't really dive into it, although he did say some intriguing things. He has since transitioned his podcast. He had a podcast, bunch of episodes. You can go look for it, audio podcast. Black Man with a Gun is the name of it, all kind of one word there. And he's a pastor now, I think, and he does like online pastoring for in particular for men. Doesn't all shapes and all shapes, ethnicities. No, not even though he's a black man with a gun, he caters to all people, all men, in particular the outdoorsy type, fishermen, hunters, etc. And so we had a conversation. Now we didn't specifically get into the Second Amendment, and but I wanted to. He said some things that were kind of intriguing to me that I really wanted to check before I did this episode, but we're here now, and we may pull it up here and try to get this. So we'll run through this. Well, actually, I'll put this on the screen here. Wouldn't be opposed to a video entirely dedicated to it either. It's not gonna take me long because my whole shtick about the Second Amendment is that it was not intended for black folks. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. We can cover it right now. I am going to read through what the Second Amendment says according to the NRA, but that's my whole stick. That's my whole spiel. It is about the black. It was about the suppression of the natives of this land and black folks. That's what it was about. And the books that I just recently read by Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, and it's called Loaded. I'll put these screenshots up here. And another book by Tom Hartman. And I've also read a few other things that I'll put into the something else I'll put into the description of this video. When I gotta redo everything, is that these two individuals have clearly laid out that the Second Amendment was about posseing up to capture runaway slaves, to suppress potential slave revolts, and to suppress Indians and take their territory. That's what it was about. Full 100%. Now, you've asked me a question before, Garrett, about making sure that it was somehow to stop oppressive government or something. I can't find that in the literature. I read a few other things. Again, I'll put those into the descriptions of what I've read, but I can't find that in particular literature. I think that is a mythology that has grown out of that. There's other material stating that in somewhere around the 1910s or so, when a number of Italians had immigrated to the United States, or emigrated, whatever word it is, immigrated. I think it's immigrated to the United States, that they didn't want to become so victimized by other ethnic groups, Irish, black, not the blacks were doing anything, but the quote unquote white folks, and they started to carry guns themselves, little derringers and whatnot. And so when you look at the records of who was being arrested for carrying a firearm, it was a lot of Italians. So when did the laws as we know them, or the philosophy that we know them, begin to take place? That philosophy took place in the 1960s in response to the Black Panther movement, when the Black Panthers were walking around with guns, showing up at the state capitol in California when Ronald Reagan was the president. When he was the governor of California, right? It was in response to these types of things that we get what we now know as more licenses, and all that. So where do we get this modern day license from? It was from what was going on with the Italians, 1910s or so, and to the response to the Black Panthers. That's it in a nutshell. So this idea that all Americans were always no. Even before the United States was established, one of the first things that they did, they being the white folks of this land, 1600s, 1700s, before 1776, before 1783, the establishment of the United States and its Constitution, they took away the rights of Black folks to defend themselves. They took away the rights from people to defend themselves. We can do a longer video. I can show you the documents, but I'll put them up here. And so so if Black folks were walking on the street with a cane, 1700s, right, with a cane, dogs, anything that they could be used and foreseen as a weapon. Now, when Black folks from what we now know as the New England area, even further down Virginia area, when they would go into the western frontier, again, they were helping to tame free Blacks, that is, were helping to tame the land and chase off the Indians. They were permitted to carry guns, but that was only under certain circumstances. But Black folks, free Black folks, in what we now know as New England area, Connecticut, the Virginia area, those folks couldn't carry guns. And then for a while, Black folks could vote. Soon after, they had their voting privileges taken away. So this idea that we were all Americans, we're all in this together, and rah rah rah, and this, that, and the other. No, that's not the case. That's just not the case. Again, I'm referring to a lot of literature that has been worked about this. But I do want to read through the Second Amendment from the NRA, and I wanted to do this. I'm gonna read through a little bit more about the NRA so we can get to their opinion about this. Okay, so this is the NRA. Make sure you guys can see it here. NRA ILA, Instituted for Legal Action, right? This is from their site. What is the Second Amendment and how is it defined? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Let me pull up something else here, because if I can remember this, Constitution, Article 1, I think it's Section 8. I think it's Section 8. I think this is it. I think it's Section 8. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Okay, yep, that's it. All right, so most people, when they read this particular statement here, this is highlighted, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state. So what does that term militia means? And again, I'm referring to people who are far more experts than I, talking about that was the ability to posse up, not just a military as we would know it today, but the ability to posse up, being necessary to the security of a free state, right? In other words, how do we make sure that the natives of this land, and how do we make sure that the slaves don't uprise? The right of the people to keep and to bear arms shall not be infringed, right? So the right of the people. So the question is, who are the people, right? We got to understand that. In just 27 words, the Second Amendment solidifies one of America's most fundamental freedoms, the right to keep and bear arms. But what is the Second Amendment, and how does it protect you as an American? Here are the facts. What is the Second Amendment? In short, the Second Amendment states that an American citizen, you have the individual right to arm yourself. The amendment also firmly establishes the government cannot infringe on that right. The Second Amendment was ratified on December 15th, 1791, as one of the first of the 10 amendments to the Constitution, known as the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights expanded upon the Constitution by establishing clear individual rights, limiting the government's power, and further laying down the foundation of American freedom. A lot of this stuff about the Constitution of who was the people was not settled until case law and laws, particularly court cases after the 1960s, after the Black Panthers in 1968, 1969, etc. Today, the Second Amendment remains fundamental to protecting the rights of law-abiding gun owners. What the Second Amendment means: it was no small task for the founding fathers to put the building blocks of American freedom into writing. There was much debate amongst them about the amendment's proposed contents. However, they did widely agree that the Second Amendment's intended meaning. Let's take a look at the meaning in a bit more depth by breaking down all 27 words line by line. A well-regulated militia. The term militia mentioned in the Second Amendment's opening line refers to the American people as George Mason described it. I ask, sir, what is a militia? It is the whole people, except for a few public officials. The Supreme Court has established that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right relegated by one's militia status, and we'll go down to 2 and 3 down here a little bit, being necessary to the security of a free state. The founding fathers felt that citizens should be able to protect themselves against the government and that any other threat to their well-being or personal freedom. That's interesting. Any other threat. Now, again, I'm going to disagree with this statement here. The founding fathers protect themselves, they should be able to protect themselves against the government. The Second Amendment granted citizens that right, giving them the ability to defend themselves and their property. But against who? Though times have changed dramatically, the need for defenses afforded by the Second Amendment have remained the same. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That final line states that the citizens have the individual right to own firearms for lawful purposes, and that the government may not interfere with that right. The Fourth Amendment, which protects another fundamental individual right, uses similar language. The Fourth Amendment states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches, seizures shall not be violated. Again, the right of the people. Who are the people? It certainly wasn't black folks. It certainly wasn't black folks. And in the 1850s, we get the Dred Scott decision, in which they said, quite frankly and quite honestly, we're going to stop arguing about all this, who the people are, and that there is no free or slave, no black person has any rights that any white man is obligated to respect. So when these people were writing these laws and making us 3/5 of a man, and we weren't, even if there were free black folks at that time, it was not them. It's not talking about them. This similarly is notable because it affirms that the founding fathers intended the Second Amendment to protect an individual right. The District of Columbia versus Heller, a landmark Supreme case for the Second Amendment, references this comparison. Second Amendment court cases. Several court cases have been ratified since 1961, 2008. June 26, 1968, the Supreme Court affirmed that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right to keep and bear arms for lawful purposes, right? Because I think in that particular case, and again, I have some other notes that I'll put into the descriptions here, is talking about, what was it talking about? Second Amendment guarantees the individual right to keep and bear arms, right? Should we have the ability to have pistols? I believe that was that court decision. The court's decision was breakthrough for the Second Amendment rights and meant that the founding fathers' intention to grant the individual right could not be misinterpreted by those seeking to pass unconstitutional gun control legislation, even though we have gun control legislation today. The ruling read in part, the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with a service in the militia and to use that arm for traditional lawful purposes such as self-defense within a home. Right. So there, could you have a firearm without being connected to the military? And again, I told you about in the 1700s, 1791 and all that black folks were the first to have special permits, and they had to be connected to the military. White folks didn't. White folks did not have to have special permits. Only black people had to have that. So again, this mission creep about who's going to have guns. I told you about what happens to the Italians, right? They started getting arrested for it. So all this mission creep, we got to control who has access to weapons. So this is where a lot of this gun control and all this type of stuff, and then we get a final passing of this law, this ruling in 2008. McDonald versus Chicago, 2010, right? This is all fair. All this thinking that we have about the Second Amendment is all fairly modern type of thinking. Despite the Supreme Court's ruling in Heller, some states still tried to pass laws that infringed upon an individual right to keep and bear arms. In McDonald, the Supreme Court affirmed that the 14th Amendment, Americans had the individual right to bear arms regardless of city or state, right? What is the 14th Amendment? I got to remember these. I don't want to be wrong about this. Right, citizen due process, equal protection under law. That was for black people, right? 14th Amendment, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment were all about black people, right? Who is an American citizen? Who has the right to the protection of the Constitution, right? We had to get special amendments just to be considered citizens of this country and be guaranteed the same rights as white folks. Think about that. So you're going to tell me that, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment all came after slavery ended. So it stands to reason that the first 10, the first Bill of Rights were not geared towards us. The ruling reads apart the 14th Amendment incorporates the Second Amendment right, recognizes in Heller to keep and bear arms for the purpose of self-defense. That's 2010. Protection for all law-abiding citizens. So what does all this mean for you? While the Second Amendment is short in length, it's broad in the scope of its protections. Gun laws vary by state, and some, such as California, has stricter regulations than others. That means the place you call home may impact how and when you can exercise your Second Amendment rights. So this goes on here, right? And here's some sources, here's some debates, and all this. All right, so let me. Okay, that's from the NRA. That's from their website in particular. Again, when I had a conversation with a black man with a gun, he was talking about, that he was trying to join the NRA and he was giving speeches like in the 1990s, and people from the NRA were pulling him aside, giving him resources and information. I would love to see the resources and information that he was given. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, why does this do this? Let me see here. What is the disagreement about founding fathers defending themselves against the government? I just haven't seen that. I mean, I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced that was the case. I just don't think that was the case. And I'm going to try to make that right now. That whatever any form of government becomes obstructing to those ends is the right of the people to alter and abolish it and institute a new government. Right. How'd that work out on January 6th? I mean, how'd that work out on January 6th, right? How'd that work out when was it Smedley Butler they tried to get to overthrow the government? And he testified before Congress in the 1920s or 30s or so, whenever that was. I mean, these are just words, and they're not going to allow that. I mean, they're just not going to. I know that those are the words on the paper, but they're just not going to allow it. This is why I have issues and problems. This is why I have issues and problems with what ICE is doing, because it's mission creep. Because when the Marines get stationed in California, that breaks all kinds of laws and rules and traditions. And if nobody fights against that becomes problematic. It becomes problematic. So this is the U.S. Constitution, right? Article 1. We're going to go down to Section 8. And we're going to read just a little bit about this. Again, I'm admitting I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm referring to those who are vastly more knowledgeable than myself, right? So these are the things that Congress has the power to do: collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, right? Collect taxes, right? Right? Isn't Trump doing tariffs? Does he have that power? Where the heck is Congress? Where the heck is Congress? Duties and taxes are tariffs and collections from foreign countries. Who's borrowing money, right? Regulate commerce with foreign nations, right? Establish uniform rule of naturalization, right? How do people become citizens, right? Coin money, right? To provide punishment for counterfeiting. Establish post offices, right? Right. So they always talk about getting rid of the post office. Can't. Congress, right? Promote progressive progress of science and useful arts, right? They should be funding all this type of stuff. They should be funding the universities to do research, right? To declare war, right? We just bombed people, right? That's an act of war. Where's Congress? Crazy. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. We have a standing army. We have a standing army. We have a standing Marine Corps. It says to provide and maintain a Navy, right? They needed that for commerce, right? You want to be able to, I mean, not just take carnival cruises and have pirate ships, but, you know, all this oil that they get that's being tankered in and all that. We need a Navy to make sure that the pirates aren't getting to it. Okay, that's great. Standing armies? Longer than 2 years? Do they do that every 2 years? Come on. To make rules for government and regulation of land and naval forces. I guess that land and naval forces probably would mean the Marines. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute laws upon the Union to suppress insurrection and do what? Repel invasions. Suppress insurrections. That's the militia to do that. Go back to the Second Amendment. Go back to the Second Amendment. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying, right? Article 1, Section 8 grants that authority anyway. That's why I'm saying, that's why Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, who loaded, that's why Tom Hartman, who I'm assuming is an historian, done their research, are all saying, and again, I've got other sources as well, I just don't remember the authors' names, but I'll put them in the resources here, are all saying that Article 1, Section 8 covers what the military should be doing, provided we, you know, get approval every 2 years. I'm sure that they're doing it every time that they give money, you know, but I'm saying we shouldn't even have it, right? A standing army, whatever. Right, to provide for organizing and arming and disciplining the militia, governing such parts, right? So we've got appointment of officers, training, and all that kind of stuff. So we've got this from Congress to do all that, to do this. That's why we're saying that the Second Amendment was really about the people, the white males in particular, having the ability to suppress the natives of this land and to suppress any type of slave insurrections against any type of slave insurrections. So that's my opinion. That's my opinion. So I happen to agree that it won't be allowed, but that's the whole problem. King George didn't allow the founding fathers to do what they did, so they risked execution to do it. They would have revolted. What better way to avoid what happened to them by giving everyone firearms? Hence the Second Amendment. If you feminize the women, if you feminize the men and take away firearms, any government could have ultimate power. I think that's true to a certain extent. However, Australia took away their guns and they don't have an anarchy. Again, when you take a look at the gun culture, and again, these will be in the notes that I'll, you know, if you read that stuff that I put in the gun culture. The gun culture in the United States, right? There's something like 300 million guns, and something like 30% of the population owns the guns. The gun culture that we have in the United States, our fetishization with guns, is because, let's just put it out there for everyone to see. It's because white males have an inherent fear of black males. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. I don't like saying it. I'm not happy about it, but from the inception of this country, when they wanted to defeat the natives, from the inception of this country, when they wanted to keep black folks under control, to when the Civil War was over, again, when these troops when the federal troops in left the Reconstruction, left the South after Reconstruction, what was the first thing they did? They enacted slave codes and reenacted many of the laws. Black folks couldn't carry guns unless they were somehow connected to the military, couldn't own dogs, couldn't own canes, couldn't and right, you had to have special licenses to do any of that type of stuff. Now black folks are, again, talk about feminized. That's the original feminized males in this country have always been black men. Have always been black men. So and so then we get to get the turn of the century, 17th, 18th century. We get a few 19th century. We get after Reconstruction, 1877. Jim Crow is in full effect by 1891. After the 1900s, we get the branching out of fear of other males, Italian males, as I mentioned, right? Then we get the 1960s, right? And all this time, right? Who's being lynched? What was the founding factor of black folks being lynched? What was the underpinning of that? The fact that they didn't own guns. When black folks owned guns, there was practically no lynchings. It was when the police forces took away the guns from them, and they took away the guns from them, confiscated them through court orders, through just sheer force, and that's when lynchings begin to rise. That's when we get a bunch of something like over 100 throughout the years, over 100 race riots attacking black folks because we didn't have the ability to defend ourselves. So where was this Second Amendment then? It wasn't meant for us. And we had to get court laws and legislation, and took Huey Newton and the Black Panthers in the 1960s to read through all this, to read through the state laws, to read through the Constitution and say, we have the right to defend ourselves. We're sick of this nonsense, right? It wasn't just the Black Panthers, right? We get the Deacons of Defense in the South and all that kind of stuff, right? So there was always black folks who were willing to, yes, as you wrote in here, to be offed in defense of ourselves. Absolutely. So then we get 2010, 2008. We had to get codified in law about due process, and they had to go back to who is an American citizen, who is it that is allowed to own these guns. 2008, 2010, these different court decisions, and they had to finally say, knock it off. Black folks can own guns. But the reason we had to continue to fight, not just black folks, but all people have the right to own guns. So we had to take a look at that and say, man, this is crazy. So right, firearms can be an arm of suppression or defense, but bad men respect power, and most of the time the only way to stop them is force when something they respect. I totally agree with that. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Totally agree with that. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is that. I just want black folks to say, when we have this power, this, that, and the other, black folks in this country are always under this we're always operating with this tepid tiptoeing around. When we look at the ICE raids that are going on, there's always this idea in the back of our mind that we could be next. And we like to think of ourselves as fully blooded Americans, where our blood is in the soil just like everybody else's. We fought in almost every single conflict, including the Revolutionary War, that fought in every conflict, right? Buffalo Soldiers doing what they got to do, right? Vietnam, all these, Korea, Afghanistan, all these different wars, Spanish-American War, all these wars where black folks were involved in them. Our blood is in the soil just as much as anybody else's, right? So, but yet and still, when we came back from all these different wars, when we came back, we were lynched, sometimes in our uniforms, right? And it was finally in World War II when black folks said, enough is enough. After we came back from World War II, enough is enough. And that's what really sparked the civil rights movement, right? Then we get 1950s about school desegregation. That's what really started the civil rights movement. And so we had enough. So we are consciously, and listen, I'm saying that we should be conscious in what we're saying, doing, how we're thinking, and all that. We should definitely know our rights. We should continue to apply our rights, but we always got to have this caution about us that what they're doing to other folks. And that's why black folks are always on the tip of the spear when it comes to fighting any type of civil rights, because we know that our relationship here is constantly on a knife's edge, constantly in danger, and it takes one slip where people pass some crazy law that affects us. So do I think as black folks that we should enforce our Second Amendment rights, 100%. Don't take what anything I've said today to say we should not enforce our Second Amendment, or you should not learn how to work a firearm or possess a firearm. You got to know how to protect yourself and your family and your stuff. Absolutely, 100%. But I'm just my point is that wasn't meant for us. Now we've got, and you know, just like they're fearful about taking stuff away from us, the first thing that they'll do is try to disarm you. And I have no doubt. I talked about Australia, how they disarmed them. They don't have, to the racial extent, the problem that we do in here. And again, the problem here is that white folks they talk about get over slavery. No one has not gotten over slavery more than white people. They know what they did. They have a collective guilt and consciousness about it. They don't want to teach about true history. They don't want to teach about DEI. They don't want to teach about critical race theory. They don't want to talk about any of that kind of stuff. They want to mythologize their heroes. No one is worse than that than them. So when we talk about this, we got to be open and honest about what happened and what's going on. So we want to be American and share the American dream just like everybody else. But we got to be open and honest about that. There were several founding fathers who were pro applying the laws for blacks and were actively working out on it at that time. It's a shame they weren't quicker and took. Well, yeah, I mean, because it's a problem. I mean, I don't know about several, but certainly there were some. And even then, well, listen, I don't know. I haven't. All I can know is what I read. I'll take your word for it about that. I'm not exactly sure about several and how they were pro-black or applying for laws for black folks. I think that they were conflicted because they enjoyed the fruit of their labor. They enjoyed access to their sex slaves. I think they enjoyed access to free stuff. They enjoyed the hoity-toity lives that their slaves were giving them. And some of them free them when they were on their deathbed or in death. Yeah, they did. But while they were living, they lived it up. They lived it up. So in ancient times, Xerxes signed a law that allowed the Jews to be killed, and after discovering the plot, he couldn't reverse the decision. Even as king, he gave a new law allowing the Jews to defend themselves against their assailants. They talking about from the Bible. Is King Xerxes from the Bible? I mean, that I'm not exactly sure that. I don't know. I'm not a historian like that, and I don't take that stuff from the Bible seriously. In all honesty, I don't think a lot of that happened. All right, so that's the presentation for today. Thank you guys for joining. Again, my guest that I was supposed to be here today could not make it, and we wish him the speedy recovery. He did reschedule for July 29th, so we're going to do it again on July 29th. But that's my presentation about the Second Amendment. I will change the thumbnail, and I will put all my resources in here. Again, I read from the Constitution, and here are the books that I'm going to put up here. Share screen. Here is the book loaded. Oh, geez. Here's the book loaded. You probably can see it. Let's go to it. Come on. Oh, geez. Present. Share screen. Loaded. So this is the book by Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, A Disarming History of the Second Amendment. And The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment by Tom Hartman, Hidden History series. So you guys can read through this if you want. Both of these books are on audiobook, so you can listen to them on audiobook. I mean, if you put the speed up, you can get through loaded in a day in like 3 or 4 hours. And I think the same thing for Second Amendment, Tom Hartman's book. So anyway, so that's my presentation. Thank you so much for checking it out. Yeah, it comes from the Bible verse. Yeah, I don't think a lot of that stuff happened in the Bible, in all honesty. So so that's my presentation for today. Thank you guys so much for checking it out. Tomorrow is Thursday, and I'm going to do a members only video. I got 2 videos that I want to cover, so I'll decide which one we're going to do first. So thanks for joining. Hit the like button on your way out. Much love and peace, everyone.